Hi everyone, welcome to Limbo. In today's show, I had the pleasure to speak with a friend called Zelda. So, Zelda and I met a few months ago on Twitter and we really enjoyed each other's vibe. We set up a call, we talked about entrepreneurship, teenagers, everything wrong with education. And I knew that eventually I had to interview her for a podcast, and she was open to do the Limbo podcast, and that was amazing. So, what we talk about. So Zelda, just to give you some context, she's an entrepreneur, she's an educator, she is high school dropout student, and she did it when it wasn't cool yet. Okay, and she's been living her life just trying to create change in education. And so, if you're interested in that topic of education, I feel like you're going to enjoy this conversation. But also, if you're interested in just the way society treats students and teenagers and how we live in a generation, we're part of a generation that has access to the internet and can build opportunities just by sharing ideas on the internet. So I feel like that was also part of our conversation. And yeah, hopefully you'll enjoy this talk between me and Zelda. She's amazing. You should definitely go follow her and check her socials, also her podcast. It is on a small break, but eventually it will come back, hopefully, and it's really worth it. So without further ado, here's my conversation with Zelda Poem about teenagers, school, and society. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Limbo Podcast. Today, I have with me Zelda. Zelda, thank you so much for taking my invitation. How are you today?
I'm good. Really excited for this conversation. Thanks for having me.
No, you're welcome. We've met before, we've talked before, but this is actually the first time that I'm interviewing you, and it's funny because I have so many questions. But I want to start with a more general question. So how would you describe yourself? Because I was talking with a friend, and I was saying, well, you know what, the next guest for the podcast is going to be Zelda, and then I struggled with words trying to define the kind of work that you do, and so I'm hopefully you can explain it better than me.
The more time passes, the less I am able to explain what I do. I mean, my subject, my life dedication is on education. So I'm a high school dropout. I'm a book publisher. My book is for teens to learn how to hack their education. I run a school for young entrepreneurs. I'm an educator. I'm a facilitator. So yeah, education is my jam. But also I've explored so many different paths with art, with shamanism, with psychology. And I'm trying to bridge all these different topics with education. So that's what I do.
Mhm. That's awesome. You mentioned shamanism. Was that it? Like, how did that happen?
um, Shamanism happened with me moving to Mexico. Well, shamanism happened with me having an accident while living in Mexico. And an accident really bad uh, that
Oh
modern
wow.
science couldn't really explain, modern medicine couldn't really explain. And yeah, it set me on a journey to, find answers. And in the end, I think you never end up finding answers for these kind of events that happen to you because we're not gods. But you
Mm.
can build answers that are satisfying for you. And this is what happened to me thanks to shamanism. So
Mm.
yeah, we in Mexico, we don't necessarily call it shamanism. I think this is the word that most people will
Mm.
understand. This is
Mm.
traditional healing. This is, you know, exploring alternate states of consciousness with dance, with
Consciousness.
music, and that allow you to understand the world better, basically, and understand
Hmm.
yourself better.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that makes a lot of sense. So, going going back to your origin story, you are a high school dropout yourself, and it's funny because in the previous episode I've had here Sarah. And Sarah, her name on Twitter is Sarah in the Woods. I don't know if you follow her. She's basically a mom that homeschools. She has a lot of things going on in her life. And one of the things she was mentioning was that in her own journey, after going through public school, she had very clear the idea that she wanted to homeschool, because even though she couldn't drop out, she wanted like to have a clear different experience for their children, a different experience from the one that she got. And I'm curious about that. Like, you dropped out of high school, what happened? Why? Tell us that story. Why did you end up doing that?
Yeah. I mean, you know, most students are unhappy in public school. That is not crazy to say. Most students feel depressed or unmotivated. They lack of meaning when they go to high school. In my case, I was really depressed and really lacking sense in my school journey, and um, I just couldn't keep going. Basically, it was
Mm-hmm.
again it was a question of my own health, and I had to drop out, and I didn't leave the choice to my parents, and I didn't leave the choice to my teachers, because I knew that if I wanted to survive, I needed to get out of this place.
Mm-hmm.
So it originally came from a sense of urgency. I think most, successful entrepreneurs who dropped out, the story that we tell is, oh, they finished the program and they were already like seen as geniuses. And so, they dropped out. That wasn't my case. I didn't have any ambition. I was super lost. I was super depressed, as I said. And my only option was to drop out. And thanks to this decision, I found myself and I became very ambitious, and I started to build up for myself lots of opportunities that led me to become a published author at 18 years old, for example. But that wasn't at all, what my teachers would have thought I would end up doing. They really thought I was going
Mm-hmm.
to waste my life by dropping out of school.
Mm-hmm. What made you do that, or what made you like go through that change? Because from my understanding, for what you're saying, you were like this depressed teenager, as a lot of teenagers are, and you make this decision, and then suddenly you're talking about like having all of these opportunities, being an author at 18. Like, how did that mental change happen? Was it just removing
Hmm.
yourself from school?
Yeah, that's a great question. I am an internet kid. I am a lover of the internet and computers. And so it's hard to tell the story because there are so many layers, there are so many things happening at the same time. The first, like the seed of this journey of developing lots of opportunities in the education industry, in the startup industry, is me starting to publish articles online as a 14, 15 years
Mm-hmm.
old, and sharing my opinion on public school in France, where I'm originally from. And while I'm experiencing this, in contrast, I'm like super depressed and stuck at school. And so
Mm,
I kind of live a double life at this point. There is my life online, in which I'm recognized as this, high schooler publishing super cool articles on education. And then there is me at school and super depressed and feeling like, yeah, I just can't keep going. And so
mhm,
the deal that I do with my mom at this time is, she let me like peacefully let me drop out if
mhm,
I still study in order to get my high school diploma, which is possible in
mhm,
France. You can go to the exam as an external candidate. So that was one of the
Mm-hmm.
conditions. And then the other condition, which was more of what I wanted to do, was find a job and, just experience the professional world. And I was obsessed with revolutionizing education from that point on. So what I asked myself when it came to, exploring the professional world was, okay, how, this is literally the question I ask myself, which is a little naive, but also like so beautiful, because this is just the way I think lots of teenagers are at this age. I just ask myself, okay, how can I revolutionize education the fastest possible? And when you're a teen, you don't
Mm-hmm.
really like, at least for me, I didn't have a very good understanding of how time passes. So, like, already thinking of
Mm-hmm.
2 or 3 years in the future was like, oh my God, this is way too long. It needs to change right now. But so to have this dream realize, I thought that innovation and startups were the best way. The other way would be politics, which I wasn't interested in at all. And so I dropped out of high school. I spent my 2 month of summer holidays grinding on my computer to find an apprenticeship in a ed tech startup, in an education startup. And after those two
Mm-hmm.
months of grinding, I didn't have any skills compared to so many teens, especially in the US, who like are coders or marketers or whatever. I was
Mm-hmm.
faking it till I would make it eventually to a company.
Mm-hmm.
And so I did. I found an apprenticeship in an edtech company. I moved to Paris, and here I was, in the adult world, still tied a little to high school because I was studying my high school program, as I promised to my mom. And from there, everything went very, very fast, because I think that when you take very bold decision, and dropping out of high school in France at the time was extremely bold, you get
Mm-hmm.
rewarded for it. And so I immensely rewarded for the decision. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. It's funny. I never thought about the relationship between teenagers and the lack of notion on how time works, and the lack of patience, and startups being like a medium for high paced change. So that's a great connection. And also, it's funny to see that you were already living something that I feel like it's part of our generation, which is like this difference between the live offline and live online, right? You're a depressed teenager in high school, and online you're this very cool teenager writing articles about how to change it. And I feel like part of what our generation tries to do is to maybe like combine both of these, like combining your offline life with your online life by meeting friends, like this, by creating these relationships in podcasts, through social media, whatever, and then bringing it to real life. And I think that's just great. One of the questions that I had, you mentioned that you were someone that really enjoyed computers, and maybe that shines light into this next question, which is you clearly like, or at least you use a lot, the word hackers. And I would love to have your personal definition of hackers, because I don't believe you're talking just about hackers like computer hackers. I feel like there's something in there. So can you please explain to us what hackers mean to you?
Yeah, thanks for this question. Um, to hack is a philosophy for me. And this is the very first page of the book I published, the book being called Hack Your Education. Um, I explain in this first page of my book that, in the context of the book and in the context of whatever I'm saying when it comes to hacking, hacking means when you find a smarter way to do something than what is proposed to you, than what is supposed to be the rule. And when you use this time that you earned to do something meaningful. And the book is about that. It's about giving you methods to work as little as possible on your high school program and have good grades and make your parents happy, so that you have more time to actually do things that are meaningful to you, that are interesting, that are joyful for you. And this is the way I built my life. I really don't care about rules. Not because I am like this rebel who just enjoy breaking rules, but because I'm always trying to ask myself, like, how can I do this better? How can I do this in a more efficient way? Is there another way that we haven't thought of, but that's just better? And so to me, hacking is that. And I'm not a coder, so I've never like actually hacked computers, but I so relate to this culture of hacking, that I use this word all the time. Absolutely.
Which I think is that disdain for rules and that like openness to think about, well, what are other ways that we can do this. It's very typical in younger people, and then it gets lost. And my question is that something that's natural to you, or do you have any kind of practice or experiences that you go through that allow you to keep that open-mindedness and to keep that search for hacking?
I think it's tied in my DNA. Like, I really think that I'm naturally like that. So it's not easy for me to give tips or to give best practices. But maybe something that I can share that might be useful is being a hacker is a mix of being creative and being courageous. So that means you need first creativity to, observe what can be better. And then you need courage in order to do it. So that's another framing that might be useful to think about this hacking brand, this hacking culture that I talk about all the time.
That's such a great combination of creativity plus courage, because I feel like a lot of people are one of them. Having both of them in someone is rare and good, at least in my experience. So okay, and how about like, so maybe you were saying that this is really tied to your DNA, so it's hard for you to give tips on this. I feel like part of what may help is just to have contact with as many realities as possible. That's something that I would argue for. So like traveling, reading books, meeting different people, because if we're stuck into a small group of influences, the people that we know and the books that we read and the TV shows that we watch, and that's it, thinking about the world in a different way, it's way harder than if you're constantly getting new inputs in your life, if you're constantly talking with new people, having new experiences. I feel like all of that helps you keep that open-mindedness that's necessary for you to then be able to think differently. I don't know if you agree or not.
Yeah, 100%. It's funny because I think that I agree so much with what you just said. And I was thinking, okay, yes, that's like what my life looks like as of today. But how did it came initially when I was a teenager stuck in, a mid-sized city in France, and like just unhappy, unambitious, not at all surrounded by, inspiring people. But actually, this and I want to highlight this because I think that for the people listening, it's not especially if you're young, it's not always possible to travel. It's not always possible to be surrounded by people that you choose, but thanks to the internet, and this is really this is what I got, and that kind of
Mm-hmm.
helped me uncover these secrets that, like, again, in France was something nobody had done before. To drop out of high
Mm-hmm.
school to do something good with your life was a super super radical idea. And so yeah, by being exposed to other people online and by reading some articles and by publishing myself, I created myself a bubble of fresh
Mm-hmm.
air that indeed allowed me to then, like, make this reality check and realize that there were things that I was capable to improve in my own reality. So yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Hmm.
Yeah, developing that sense of agency, because I feel like a lot of times what happens with teenagers is you kind of have an idea, or you have this feeling of untapped potential within you, but then you lack the influences, or the stories of people that did whatever you want to do or something similar, to just unlock this opportunity of believing in yourself, right? And I feel like the internet is the key for that, because you can be in a very rural area in the middle of France or in the middle of Portugal, and you can have all of these examples of people, of teenagers your age as well, doing all of these awesome things, right? And I feel like if you have contact with that, usually there's two kinds of people. There will be the people where they'll think, oh, this is awesome, that means that if they can do it, I can do it as well, let me leverage these opportunities. Then you'll have another type of people who will say, well, but the only reason that works is because they're in the US, or because they're in France, they're not in Portugal, or because they're in Portugal, they're not in Africa, whatever it is. Like you have all of these different examples, and I feel like that part is it starts at least by being very natural, by being part of your DNA, right? Almost like I'm not looking for excuses. I'm looking for stories that prove me right in the way that I can access to my potential and act upon it. And I feel like the internet is a key to that. You mentioned a lot about publishing your articles and being active online. Besides this whole journey, what other benefits have you seen by being publicly online?
Um, I mean, there are only upsides to being public online. I mean, no. In my experience, there are only upsides. I guess it depends on, like, what kind of media you use. But when it comes to publishing articles, I think there are
Mm-hmm.
only upsides. Um, because, you know, even if you don't end up becoming super famous, even if you end
Mm-hmm.
up being read by just 1 or 2%, you had a direct impact thanks to your thoughts. And you may meet even one person who's going to change the course of your life forever because they enjoyed and they connected to what you wrote.
Mm-hmm.
And that's my story, actually. Like, I published those articles, they got like quite trendy in France, and then I got read by the teacher of a class in the top university of France. And so this guy first invited me as a guest teacher. So in a university where
Oh wow.
never I would have been accepted as a student, me, a 17 years old, I was giving a class, and a very, like, very very elitist, very elitist university. So it was super hilarious. But the craziest part about that is that I, at this point, started to consider publishing a book, but I had
Mm-hmm.
no network in the publishing world, not at all. I was still like,
Mm-hmm.
I started to have a network in startups, but like, editing and publishing is something completely different, super old school
Mm-hmm.
industry. And
Mm-hmm.
so I talked with this teacher, Antonin, and I tell him, like, he asked me, like, okay, what's next, etc. And so I tell him, yeah, thinking of maybe writing a book. And
Mm.
his cousin was the founder of a publishing house. And I ended up publishing my book with them because they were
Awesome.
super, super cool publishers. So this
Awesome.
story is like this alignment of stars that you just can't plan. You just can't
Mm-hmm.
plan when you write the first word on your Google Doc, thinking about what's your article going to be about. And so this is why it's so worth it. It's also so in terms of opportunity, it's just like whether you're looking for a job, whether you're looking to build something, if someone can read what you've like something that you've thought, it's just so powerful. It just show that you do more than 99% of people. So that's one thing. Another thing is just, um, like, yeah, it takes courage to publish your ideas online.
Mm-hmm.
It takes a lot of work. It takes progressing in writing. It takes discovering new tools. Where are you going to publish your article? So many new skills learned that maybe don't necessarily like get useful with what you end up doing as a career, but just the act of like looking it up online and like doing something, develop soft skills that will be
Mm-hmm.
useful to you in so many other contexts. So for all
Yeah.
these reasons, I think that publishing things online is the best investment of your time you can do when you're young. um,
Mm-hmm.
and yeah, it will, if again, even if you feel like nobody's going to read you, it
Mm-hmm.
you just need one person to read you. That's
Yeah,
enough
and
to be something extremely positive. Maybe no one reads you and it's still positive.
yeah, because you're putting your ideas out there. I feel like that this is a conversation I have a lot. I published a piece that we both work at TSC at the Socratic Experience, and I want to ask you about your elective. But the whole reason why I got that job, and Michael wanted to work with me was because a few months earlier I had published a newsletter around teenagers and being the key to a modern golden age, and like that was in my Substack for a long time before anyone actually read that and like offered an opportunity, right? So I always say that you're building this bank of opportunities. I feel like the biggest resistance and there's it's starting to dissipate, which I think is something positive, but people still have an hard time, especially older people still have parents have an hard time understanding that right now, or we live in a world where ideas can make you money, ideas can make you can help you build a career. And for a long time that just wasn't the case unless you were like this very known philosopher or writer or something like that. Usually you would win money by providing a service or by providing or by having a specific craft that you could do. And this we're living in a world where you can actually get paid just by sharing your ideas. And by sharing those ideas you can create your own career, right? You can do things that maybe no one else has done before because you're just putting your ideas together. Suddenly you're realizing that there's a need that you can like somehow fulfill with those ideas. And I feel like this relates a lot to another thing that you talk about, which is creating your own learning journey. Sorry. And my question is, can you explain to us, like, what does that mean? What does it mean to create your own learning journey?
There is a concept that so changed my life, which is a concept coined by Naval, who's an entrepreneur and like Twitter philosopher. And
Mm-hmm.
he talks about specific knowledge.
Yeah.
And I think that we live in a culture, in a world in which we're encouraged to be conventional and we're
Mm-hmm.
discouraged very discouraged. We're even threatened to be unconventional. I was, like not threatened, but I was, yeah, in a way threatened by my teachers when I said that I wanted to quit high school. And
Mm-hmm.
they told me that I would waste my life, that I would not do anything meaningful in my life, that I would waste my potential, etc. And what I got to experience firsthand, and to understand also, in theory, thanks to these concepts,
Mm-hmm.
is that we now live in a world, as you said, that changed a lot compared to the world our parents grew up in. And in this
Yeah.
world, the bridges that you build between the things that are interesting for you is what will get you a salary, basically. This
Mm-hmm.
is like the power of the different experiences you have that will make your expertise in something. And when you
Mm.
really get to understand this, you stop going after knowledge that brings you status, or experiences that bring you status. So for example, once you understood this, you don't care anymore about having a diploma from an Ivy League. You don't care
Mm-hmm.
anymore about learning to code because everyone say that learning to code
That's
is
the
the
skill to
best move
have.
for your career.
Yeah.
You just follow exactly what lights your soul on fire. And it's a long-term investment of time. Maybe it's not obvious at first, but eventually things click for you and you find this exact job, whether it's like, yeah, sharing your ideas online, or just being part of a company that needs exactly you. So you're not depending on a job title, on a job description anymore. You're being hired, or you're building what you build because
Mm.
that's you. That's exactly like you, your identity. And so, for example, I was discussing this with a friend lately. Dropping out of high school now is really trendy.
Mm-hmm.
So it became something that gives you status to say that you
Status.
dropped out in many, like, in for example, in the startup ecosystem. That's something
Yeah.
that's true. um, but for example, me saying that I lived 2 years in Mexico, and I studied shamanism, and
Mm-hmm.
like, most people don't understand what I'm talking about. And this
Yeah.
is not something that brings me any status. Open-minded people
Mm-hmm.
finds it cool, but like people that are career oriented thinks that I'm crazy. But
Mm-hmm.
eventually, all this knowledge that I have built up in that thing that is so interesting to me, that I really obsessed over for like this last 2 years. Eventually,
Mm-hmm.
these things are going to build my specific knowledge that I'm going to use in my career, and that will make me the number one expert with education and shamanism and art, and no one will
Mm-hmm.
have the same track record as mine. And so I think
Mm-hmm.
this is really, really, really powerful. This is really hard to do something that brings you no status,
Mm-hmm.
because we're humans and we're driven by gaining
Mm-hmm.
status in a way or another, depending on the context of how we live, where we
Our
live, with
lives.
whom,
Yeah.
um, our lives. But I think that this is the best investment of your time and energy that you can do,
Mm-hmm.
to build up specific knowledge. And put simply, it's really just following your passions in a very
Yeah.
obsessive way. This is what specific knowledge is about.
Yeah, and it's interesting because like one of the questions I got asked the most, not so much recently, but for a while, was, well, don't you feel bad because I wanted to be a musician, I went to college to study music, I had a wrist injury that made me switch careers. And a lot of the times people say, well, you just wasted so much time of your life studying music. And I'm like, you don't understand. Yeah, all of the experiences that I collected by being a musician are what allow me to be very unique in the way that that I go about what I do. So I totally agree with that. And I was listening to you and I was thinking about, well, clarifying your life's call, in building this specific knowledge, it does indeed take a lot of courage. Because what I was thinking about is a lot of people, and that's like the easy question we always ask ourselves, like, okay, so how can I find my calling? Like a lot of teenagers and adults as well will ask you, well, how can I find my life's passion? How can I do that? And I feel like a lot of the times it's not so much about knowing how to do it, it's more about having the courage to do it. Because I would assume that most people have some kind of latent passion, that they wouldn't mind at least exploring, but it's hard because first you need courage to take the first step, and you also need courage to keep going after realizing that maybe that's not your calling, right? Because I feel like a lot of the times you were saying that eventually people realize, okay, so I've collected enough experiences and now I can have this unique career. And and I think a lot of the times what happens is people get to a point where they give up on that. They try that. They follow like their passions for one or two periods of time, but eventually they're like, you know what, I'm wasting my life. I'm just going to remain here. And I feel like maybe the problem is with society and with teenagers, not so much about helping them understand what they want to do, is more helping them understand or develop the courage to be willing to explore that journey.
Yeah, it takes so much courage. It takes so much confrontation. I also think that like most people, find their calling just by realizing that they have the power to solve their problems, and that if they have this problem, probably many other people have it. And it takes
Mm-hmm.
so much courage to like kind of like look at your shit, look at your problem and be like, okay, like first I need to recognize I have this problem. And then I need to
Mm-hmm.
recognize that this victim talk, victim self talk that we all have, no, like not judgment, is we all have this, but yeah, like this victim talk of, oh, I'm alone in this is not true. You're not alone in this. If you have this
Mm-hmm.
problem, like most definitely at least one other person have this problem. And so then like what can you do from there? And I think that there is really little things more fulfilling and exciting than solving your problem, as you know that the solutions you're going to discover will also help other people. And to me, this
Mm-hmm.
was really what drove me the first years after I dropped out of high school. I still had, mental health difficulties. I was still depressed, but I was doing something so meaningful and so driving that
Mm-hmm.
I had this, this fire in me that would just get me going despite the challenges I was still dealing with, because life
Mm-hmm.
is nuanced, right? Like I did not solve all my problems by just dropping out of school and publishing a book.
Of course.
Um, so yeah, so I think this is really also powerful to frame this finding specific knowledge, finding your calling, with just asking yourself, what is your problem? And if
Mm-hmm.
you have this problem, and but just recognizing what are your problems is hard. Then going
Mm-hmm.
with the idea that maybe this, because it's your problem, you don't have to be ashamed of it. This is something other people probably have as a problem too, and so you can work on it. This is something that comes next. But first,
Mm-hmm.
being very honest with yourself. What are my problems? What are the things that make my life difficult, uneasy?
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
Yeah, and it's funny because I feel like recognizing that problem and being able to do that, it's lately I've been thinking a lot about pain and about how human beings relate with that notion. And I feel like it's very painful to look at your problems, right? Or to admit that they're there. And the problem with pain is that it needs time to be processed. And the same thing happens with problems, right? If you cannot solve a problem if you don't admit you have it, right? And yet for some like distorted way, this is how we think that our minds work. Well, I'm just going to ignore that problem and hopefully it goes away. It doesn't. I mean, if you're lucky, sometimes it may go away, but most of the times it doesn't, right? And so being able to once again have the courage to look at your problems, to feel the pain in the anxiety that may come from saying, okay, you know what, it's time I need to realize that I have a problem with this thing, and looking at it and trying to pass through that is something that I feel like will make you a more complete and powerful person. Like dealing with that pain, dealing with that problem, facing it will create this internal power that you can then use to allocate your energy and attention to finding your calling or finding your passion.
Yeah.
And basically living,
We,
yeah, go ahead.
I was going to add on to what you just said, that we live in a toxic positivity culture, and so yeah, like the world we live in just doesn't want us to recognize we have problems. And then where it gets weird is that on the other side of this culture there is the pop psychology culture that wants you to believe that you have all the problems in the world and you're a victim, and so like everyone should excuse you whenever you have a tantrum. I'm like, it's a caricature, obviously, but this mix, it gets very explosive because it has zero nuance on both sides. And
Yeah.
so like one side encourages you to ignore your problems and to live as if you had no problems, so to live a very numbing life, and the other
Hmm.
side tells you that you're not responsible of your problems, you can't solve your problems alone, because those problems, they're part of the system and you alone cannot do anything about that. How
Hmm.
disempowering on both sides,
Hmm. Both
the
sides.
discourse that we live in, really, that we hear, that
Hmm.
we, whether it's in conversations with friends, with family, on social media. It's so crazy. It's really about
Yeah.
getting out of the
Balance.
matrix.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
I think that it's all
Yeah.
about balance. Like a lot of times people people will be afraid of and by the way, I was in that spectrum. Like I was one of those toxic positivity persons, and I had to get out of there because first of all, you can only live your life fully by making sure that you also feel the bad things, quote unquote bad, but also because that's the way you can actually process stuff in order to become a better person, right? And I feel like because we live in this world where you're supposed to not have any kind of trouble, that's basically creating them because you're not looking at your pain, you're not looking at your problems, they are not being processed, and because of it they'll remain there until they have a moment to be processed, or until they're so within you and becomes basically part of the way you see the world, and it just taints all of your worldview, and I feel like that's not the way to live. Now, speaking of the way to live, we both of us, sorry, work in this project called the Socratic Experience. It's a Socratic school funded by Michael Strong, and you teach there, and I would love to know more about what do you teach and how is that going.
Yeah. My class is called The Art of Becoming an Adult. And we're a small group,
Which, by the
maybe
way, is
like,
such a
yeah.
great title.
Thank you. Yeah, and this class really came organically to me, just because this has been a huge topic in my life this last, yeah, like 6 7 years. And I could say so many different things about it, but maybe one idea that comes to mind is, when you drop out of high school and you start working in startups with adults only, it can get a little weird to understand what's your place in the world, and to understand, you're mature in some ways, you're really immature in some others, because you're still very, very young. And so to me,
Mm-hmm.
this topic of becoming an adult was really big in my life. And I'm super glad and thankful for the opportunity to teach this class, because beyond my personal experience that forced me to really get interested and obsessed with this topic, this is
Mm-hmm.
something that we all go through. And in the society that we live in, the lines between childhood and adulthood got extremely blurry, which means that maybe you get your driver license, maybe you graduate from university, maybe you move out of your parents' house, but to actually feel from the inside as an adult isn't obvious at all anymore for today's young people. And the
Mm-hmm.
reasons why are multiple. There is this culture in education of parents really, really being very protective of their child.
Mm-hmm.
And so, unfortunately, on the extremes of this culture, well, you don't actually let your child grow up and become an adult. And traditionally, in cultures, there is this tradition of handing the responsibilities to the teen who's becoming an adult, right? And
Yeah.
welcoming the then teen, now adult, into the community, into the tribe, as now
Mm-hmm.
recognized adults. um
Mm-hmm.
so that we had all these traditions, all these coming of age rituals that we've now lost, that have maybe we still have some of them, but they've lost their meaning, they've lost their symbolism. And
Mm-hmm.
so it became very difficult for teens to really journey into adulthood. And so this class is what it's
Mm-hmm.
about. I don't pretend I have answers, but what's for sure is that I've explored these topics from many, many, many perspectives. And so my
Mm-hmm.
invitation each week for the students is, okay, let's find a new way to explore what it means to be an adult, and not what it means to be an adult in general, but what it means to be an adult for you. Because what I also believe is that we all have to, sometimes, because of our personal story, we may have one theme that's difficult for us about becoming an adult.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe it's about identity. Maybe it's about, uh, the relationship to the parents that has to evolve. Can be so many different themes that we need to work on. And so my invitation is really for the students to figure out, okay, what's the theme, what's my theme that I want
Mm-hmm.
to reflect on within the context of this class.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's so interesting. And it may, like I was discussing this with a friend recently, which is the what's the conquest that you need to do in order to become an adult today? Is it, and we were asking about this, is it getting a house? Like, once I get a house, am I an adult? Like, is it getting a car? Is it like living by yourself? Because I remember that when I a few years ago, I was living in Lisbon. I was living, like, I was renting a home. Sure, I was sharing it with other people, but I had my place. Uh, I was already working. Still, I didn't felt like I was an adult, right? So that feeling, it's almost like now I feel that, but it wasn't like this one moment, like this one thing, or I'm an adult. I woke up one day and suddenly the world is different. No, it was like this build up of small things, and also like a lot of inquiry about, like, am I really an adult yet? Even today, like, I would say that I have the things that make me an adult, but sometimes I still think, am I an adult? Am I supposed to do anything else? What's happening, right? And so I love that you're teaching teenagers about this, when they can actually have the time to process and think about this.
Yeah, and maybe to add on to this, I think that one reason why there is so much confusion with when am I finally an adult is that, especially true for teenagers, teens are just not taken seriously by society. And we don't get used as teens to, be listened to, be valued, be recognized for
Mm-hmm.
what we add on in our community, in our school, in our society. And those are the things that actually make you an adult. To be responsible for other people is one of the things that make you an adult. But you stay stuck in school, handed a schedule that you haven't chose in many education systems.
Mm-hmm.
And then you go on to university, and you don't really choose your university because you're interested by that one university, but just because it's one of the best university that you could get to. And then you graduate, and and you're still not like, and you end up in a job in which you don't feel like you're doing anything impactful. And so you're still not contributing, like you're still not like having this experience of helping someone. And I think that
Mm.
helping others really is one of the keys of adulthood. There are many,
Absolutely.
and it would take forever to go
Yeah.
on talking with of
Naming them.
all of them. But yeah, it's yeah, of course, teenagers are really not taken seriously enough, and this
Mm-hmm.
contributes immensely to it.
Of course. Thank you. Well, Zelda, I have just one or two more questions before we wrap this up because I know you're a busy entrepreneur and you have a bunch of meetings after this conversation. So the first one would be you have your own podcast, right? Do you want to tell us a little bit about that?
um Honestly, no. Because I'm on a break with my podcast. So
Fair,
that
fair.
wouldn't be the thing that I want to. But thanks for the opportunity. But yeah, I'm on a break with my podcast right now.
That's totally fine. Then I would ask you the other question, which that I had here, which is everywhere that I go in the internet, where you have like websites, Twitter accounts, even Instagram profiles, whatever it is, I always see the Little Prince. Part of the images about that book. And my question is, what's your relationship with that book?
One of the things that we've lost in modern culture um, is a good story. We miss good stories. We miss good myth. We miss inspiring heroes that make us optimistic about the future and make us want to get out of our bed and do something courageous. And so I really love stories. I don't read nearly enough, but The Little Prince is one that really marked me as a child and really influenced me also as an adult. And there is, I mean, I think most people know more or less The Little Prince. Maybe they read it once when they were a child. I just think that the aesthetic of The Little Prince is just so poetic. And there is something so
Mm,
soft, whether it's in the
mm-hmm,
story or in the drawings that the author himself made. Um, and
mm-hmm,
I just love the imagery. Like, not only, like, I could also talk, of course, about why the story touches me, etc. But there is something about this book that I feel like is
mm,
so scarce in the world that we're living in, and is so precious and is so
mm,
magical, exactly like this little fragile rose that the little prince decides to protect. And so there are so many readings that you can do when you read this book. There is the literal reading of the story, this little boy who is a little
mm,
prince who travels, ends up in the desert. Okay, this rose. And then there is the symbolical reading, the emotional reading. And those readings, to me, are just so deep, and they talking about it makes me want to read the book again. I read it from time to time. It's been maybe 6 months or
Mm-hmm.
a year. I haven't read it, and yeah, it just like it nourishes me in places
Mm,
that otherwise aren't really nourished by what I read on social media, what I write myself, um, by the world I'm surrounded with.
mm,
So yeah, this is why, and to use this image of the little prince, just looking at the rose on my social media accounts is just my way to kind of maybe give this opportunity to someone else to to taste to
mm,
this quality of being, to this again softness, patience, to this meditative state, because on this image of
mm,
the little prince watching the rose, he's almost like meditating with looking at the
mm-hmm.
rose. So yeah, this is so inspiring to me. This is so so
Thank
so
you.
beautiful, inspiring to me.
That was a
Yeah.
beautiful answer. Thank you so much, Zelda. Okay, so we are going to wrap this up, but I want to take a moment to let you to ask you if people want to connect with you, if people want to know what you're up to, what are you doing, where like give us like your this is your moment to shine. Tell us what you're working on and also where people can find you.
Yay, thanks. I can be found on most social media, but I'm not active on most of them. My home in the online world is Twitter. So I publish regularly on Twitter. I share my ideas. I share the things I work on. I love to connect with people. I just became friend with maybe like 5 different people that I met through Twitter this year. I met Michael, the founder of the Socratic Experience, on Twitter, and we connected there. So that's the place if you want to reach out, if you like some things that I said, if you want to um, talk more about some ideas that I shared during this podcast. Feel free to DM me on Twitter. I always reply to everyone who contacts me. I also have a podcast. It's on a break right now. It's called Drop Up by Zelda Poem. I interview very unconventional people with very original ideas. I go meet them in their home. So I encourage you to check this out on YouTube, because you will be surprised to discover all the places I visited, and the places where my guests live, from a spiritual guide to the founder of the Teal Fellowship, to a very famous dancer. Um,
Mhm.
and then I'm also on Instagram, also on a break, but I have tons of content there. So if you want to learn more about me, I guess it's a good place to check out. And of course, my website, zeldapoem.com. Thank you so much for this conversation. It was awesome chatting with you. Awesome questions and time
Thank you,
together.
Zelda. Thank you. That was great. Well, to everyone, please go follow Zelda and listen to her podcast. It's amazing. I recommend it. And that's it. Thank you, Zelda. Thank you for everyone. Thank you, everyone that's listening. I'll see you all in the next episode of Limbo. Bye bye.